Well, thank you everybody for joining us today on the Scholarly Snippet session entitled Embracing AI, an Introduction to ChatGPT. So I'm your presenter today, Kyle, um, and I'm the Electronic and Technical Services Librarian, excuse me, at the California Health Sciences University. And you know what? I'm gonna stop my video here just so that we can focus up on what's ahead here. So I want to first kind of preface this by saying that this is a high level overview, right? So you might want to think like that 30,000 foot view. Okay. There's a lot that goes into making ChatGPT work, obviously. And I don't want to minimize how it works, but I do want everyone to walk away with kind of like a better general understanding of what's actually happening in the background, right? And we'll get in a little bit into prompting and stuff at the end, but I think it's really good and it's really neat to understand how all of this works, right? To better appreciate it and understand it. Um, so yeah, so we'll get into a little bit of prompting later, but let's start with, at the core we have generative artificial intelligence, so that's GAI. Um, GAI encompasses a range of generative output models, right? So it's text, images, audio, video, and a ton more now. They keep popping up. Uh, I would say ChatGPT mostly falls under text, right? Its new model can do images and stuff, but we'll say for text for now. And there's other models too. So there's Claude, there's Google's Gemini, there's Perplexity AI, and the list keeps going on and on. For images, right? Dolly, that's OpenAI, who makes ChatGPT or made ChatGPT. Midjourney is a super popular one. There's Imagine, Stable Diffusion, Adobe's Firefly. There's a lot there too. The audio and video has really expanded. So for audio, there's 11 Labs and VoiceBox and others. Video, I think Sora is one of the most popular ones. That's OpenAI, and then I think Meta has one that's called Creative Video, something like that. Honestly, it's pretty straightforward there. Um, so there's two key technologies that I want to talk about that are driving this. Obviously, again, there's more to it than that, but I want to talk first about machine learning, right? So machine learning enables the system to learn from data sets. Okay, it helps it to identify patterns, and then it makes predictions based on those two factors, right? So it's learning, it's identifying, and then it's actually able to make predictions. Okay, so just to kind of break down how that works, right, is like a three-step process. Um, and we can start with this thing called the decision process, right? So imagine that you have a jar of cookies, okay? And some are chocolate chips, or some are chocolate chip, some are oatmeal raisin, and you want to teach a computer how to tell them apart based on pictures, right? So you're going to show the computer lots of pictures of each type, okay? So we're talking thousands of pictures of chocolate chip, thousands of oatmeal, and we probably labeled them just to give it a clue, right? So then by looking at these, it's going to start guessing which ones are chocolate chip, right? So eventually you take the labels off and it starts guessing. So now you're having the computer actually make predictions about the pattern that it sees, okay? So again, you've given it a data set and now it's starting to try to identify patterns based off what it's learned and make its own predictions, okay? So that leads us to our second layer now that it's making those predictions. So it's making decisions on what it's been shown and learned, but you want to add that extra part of telling it if it's right or wrong. Okay. So it guesses chocolate chip cookie. That's right. It guesses it again and it's wrong because it's actually an oatmeal raisin, right? So you want to note that mistake and give that error function. Okay. So then the third part to this is called the model optimization process, right? So after that computer guesses and you tell it's wrong, it tries to learn from its mistakes to make it a better guess next time, right? So imagine every time it made a wrong guess, it actually started paying more attention to what makes a chocolate chip cookie different from an oatmeal raisin, right? So it kind of adjusts its thinking, it weighs it, right? Based on its mistakes. So now it's looking at what actually makes that cookie a chocolate chip cookie. Is it more round? Is it a darker color? What do chocolate chips look like versus raisins, that type of stuff, right? So that process is called that model optimization. It basically keeps trying to improve until it gets really good at telling the cookies apart, right? So machine learning is kind of the umbrella. There's a lot of different processes that are underneath that umbrella. One of the key ones, again, the second part here, is natural language processing. Okay, so this really helps GAIs do what they do, but basically, it helps them to understand, interpret, and generate human language. Okay, and I'll try to break this down again into kind of three parts that hopefully sum it up. So the first is this concept of tokenization, right? So we've probably all heard that word tokenization in reference to ChatGPT and all those, right? But I think if you think about it like a long chain of Lego bricks, okay, tokenization is kind of like breaking up those Legos into individual bricks, right? So each brick becomes a word in that sentence. Then you can look at each word separately, right? So if you have this sentence, the cat sits on the mat, tokenization would separate it into those individual words, right? So this actually helps the computer look at each word one by one to understand and analyze the sentence better, right? It's not just one block. It's actually all these little individual blocks that are interplaying with each other. The second part to this would be grammatical and syntactic analysis. So again, imagine you're building a Lego castle this time, right? There are specific rules that about how pieces connect together to actually build up that wall to make it stable, right? So this analysis is like kind of examining how the Lego pieces, which again are the words, fit together to make sure they follow the rules of building, which the rules of building are kind of like grammar in our language, right? So that the castle, so the end product, which is the sentence, doesn't fall apart. Okay, so you're taking those individual words, you're building the wall, which is grammar, right? That structure, and then you're coming up with the whole castle, which is the full sentence. Okay. So again, this helps the computer to understand how words in a sentence actually relate to each other by having that structure and making sure this, the sentence makes sense, basically, right? So then the third part to this is the semantic analysis. So this definitely goes a step further. And I mean, semantic analysis, it kind of feels like you're a detective, right? Trying to suss out what a secret note says or something. So you're looking for the meaning and relationships of the words, okay? So for our example, kind of to put everything into context, it needs to learn the true meaning of Lego and all the feelings, actions, uses, etc., that they have, which starts building on another process called self-attention, right? So basically just words in a sentence are put in context and given meaning by other words in the sentence, okay? So you can see when it's doing its analysis on Lego, it finds it's kind of related to objects, toys, the feeling of fun, creativity, that kind of stuff. But then it's also seeing that Lego comes up in proximity to words like bricks and plastic, construction toy a lot, okay? So it's kind of gaining that sense of what Lego actually means. It's a brand, but it's also something fun, it's creative, it's relaxing, it's all those different things rolled into one. So together, these technologies and more empower ChatGPT to kind of comprehend and produce relevant, contextually appropriate responses, right? And that's key. The contextually appropriate responses is very important to this whole technology. The GPT part, if you're curious, stands for generative pre-trained transformer. And the first two are pretty obvious, right? Generative in that it's creating content, pre-trained in that it's pre-trained on a massive amount of data to actually generate that. It's that transformer part that's just a little bit different, right? So for that, we're going to stick with the Lego examples here because I think it's a fun one. But just imagine that you have a big box of Legos, okay, and you want to build a model of a castle, right? A pretty big one. But instead of actually following the instructions step by step, you decide to build different parts of the castle separately, right? You build a tower, you build a gate, you build a wall separately, different areas, right? And then you want to figure out how they all fit together to make that whole castle, okay? So the transformer part of GPT is kind of like bringing in an expert Lego builder, all right, who can help you actually put all those pieces together. So the expert doesn't just look at one brick or one section of the castle at a time. Instead, it's considering all the pieces you built. Okay, it's ingesting all that information at once. So no matter if they're big, small, which part of the castle they belong to, doesn't matter. It's seeing all of it at once. So they use clues from shape, color, size, or in text, relevancy, context, all that stuff. To actually decide how everything should connect, right? Based on everything that it's learned, its experience, its training, all that stuff. So, they might notice that a certain type of tower typically fits best next to a particular wall type, right? Because it's been trained, it's seen that a million times. Or that a main gate should be in the front because, 95% of the time a main gate goes in the front of a castle, right? It's seen that a lot. So by paying attention to all these details at once, the expert will help you kind of put together the entire castle so it's strong, looks great, everything is totally in the right place. Okay, so that's how the transformer works. So it takes everything it knows, it looks at all of it at once, and then it pieces it together based on all the pattern, all the data recognition that it has formerly, right? So just to give one more example to really drive that home, imagine ChatGPT as kind of like a highly advanced librarian, right? And I know librarian, of course, I'm going to talk about that, who's basically read and memorized like an enormous library of text, right? So when you ask it a question, right, which is kind of like the input or the prompt, ChatGPT is going to search through its enormous knowledge base, okay, and craft a response based on what it's learned, right? So the process is kind of like retrieving information from a database. But instead of searching through like index files, it's going to dynamically generate those responses based, again, on patterns and relationships it's learned from the text data, okay? It's just very good at doing that. Okay, so that's kind of like my high-level overview there of ChatGPT. So in the description, I did say that I want to show, again, just how to even sign up for this, right? I really want everybody to walk away feeling confident that they can just dive into this and start playing with it and using it, okay? So I did this, obviously, a very basic Google search for ChatGPT. So I would click on this first one, and it's going to take you to a screen like this. So you want to click on sign up, and then this will probably pop up. So you put your address or your email address if you want, or you can log in with one of these. And then it take you here, so you can put your name, birthday, hit agree, and then you'll come up to this basic ChatGPT screen. So let's actually go to it live here. Okay, so we're in ChatGPT. Let me see if I can. So I want to go over the parts that we're looking at here. Okay, if you notice up here, this ChatGPT 3.5, so this is the free version. This is available to everybody. You just have to sign up for an account. If you notice, there's this 4 here available to me, so I actually subscribe to it, right? I think it's like $20 a month. So I can actually access GPT-4. And, there are some advantages to GPT-4. It kind of varies pretty much everything you can do in 3.5. Just adds things like image generation, a lot better data analysis. You can plug a website in and have it, summarize the website. Things like that are advantageous to subscribe. But generally, everything you can do there, you can pretty much do here just as well, right? So we'll stick in 3.5. If you come down here to message ChatGPT, so this is how we would interact with it, right? So we can put hello just to see what it says. All right, so then a few things happen there, right? So we got a response. All right, and if you look, you can actually have it read out loud to you the response, which is pretty neat. You can click copy here, so you can copy that, go paste it in a Word document or whatever you want. If you don't like the response, you can regenerate it to try to have it kind of remix it, or you can say that was a bad response. So this is actually very useful because, again, if it is a bad response, you want to let ChatGPT know, because it's not only going to help you, it's going to help other users and the model itself. So that's always good. If you notice up here, this popped up. So you can click on that. You can actually share a link to the chat with someone else. So if it's a really good prompt, a really good response, you can share that with people. It also popped up over here. So this is kind of the scroll of all the different chats, right? That you make with it. If you click on that button right there, you can share it again. We could rename this. So maybe we want to rename it to test, just a way to organize it, right? All the different prompts that you have or conversations. And of course, we can delete it, and then we can also archive it, right? So up here in this top left corner, the chat GPT here. So this is a way to always get to that new chat. So if I clicked on that, it would bring me right back to the new chat. So if you get lost in these different places here, you can always come up here and click that and it'll reset you. One other thing too, down here, when you see your name, if you click on that, you actually have your settings. And, there's some important settings in here too. One of the things that I usually do is change this to dark because I kind of like the contrast a little bit better. It's easier on my eyes, I think. So, but you can delete all your chats, mess around with the archive, all that kind of stuff. So going back to test. So from here, I mean, this is where the sky is kind of the limit, right? You're staring at the screen, you don't know what to do. So we can do pretty basic things. There are kind of frameworks to how we generate prompts, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But just to do something really easy, we could say, you don't have to start with please. It's just kind of something that happens automatically a lot of times. Let's say, please generate an email template for overdue books. Let's just see what happens there. Okay, so this is where you really need to start thinking about what you want help with, right? And I always imagine ChatGPT and all these GAIs as kind of assistant, right? I don't think it's going to replace us, but it's kind of like a phone. It's like a browser where you're looking up information, only it can take it a step further, and you can have a conversation with it, and it can generate things a little bit more tailored to what you need. Now, what I put in is called a prompt, right? So you're giving it information, you're prompting it. And it was very general, so I probably got a very general response here. But again, you can take this and kind of form it to how you need it. You start remixing your prompt, right, based on the output. So one of the recommendations is always, you don't always want to go with the first answer, right? You look at your answer and you see, what can I change in my prompt to, make it more relevant, right? So one of those ideas, and I use OneNote for a lot of things, so you're probably going to see OneNote a lot right now. So this is one of the frameworks. Now, frameworks for prompting that worked great a year ago, they probably don't work as good now because ChatGPT is always changing, right? So if someone says they've completely cracked the code, this is always going to work. They're probably just trying to sell you something, right? So you want to be mindful of that. This prompt or this framework for creating a prompt is one of the best that I've seen. It's one of the most consistent. And basically, it goes in order of importance here, right? So number one, the task. You're pretty much always going to give ChatGPT a task or whatever GAI you're using. This is almost required. Of course, I said hello to it the first time, so I didn't give it a task right then. But if you're, generally you're going to give it some kind of task, so that's required. And then you come down to context and exemplar. Okay, so these two, it's good to give it one of these two at least, right? So put your task in context or give an example. If you can do both, give it an example of what you want and put it in context, that's fantastic, right? But at least one of these to pair with that. And then you get down to persona, format, and tone. So these might be a little more dependent on what you're trying to prompt, right? So if you're trying to act like a marketing specialist or, a financial person, something like that, then you might dive into this persona a little bit more. If you have a specific format, absolutely. If you want a bulleted list, if you want it to be in a spreadsheet, something like that. And then the tone too can be helpful, right? If you're writing an apology letter or something like that, right? You want to put that. But so pairing like 2 to 4 of these together is going to give you a much better prompt than what I put with the email template, right? Just give me an email template for overdue books. That's not really detailed enough to get anything probably meaningful. It did spit something out. It's always going to give you something. But one of my examples here, so we can say very basic, explain the Krebs cycle like I am a beginner. Okay, so this is giving it a task, right? We're explaining the Krebs cycle. And then, I mean, you could say that this is kind of putting it in context or maybe persona, right? So beginner, it's just a very basic one. But we can upgrade this by saying you're a tenured biomedical professor at a college of osteopathic medicine, okay? So we're definitely giving it persona. We're giving it a little bit of context that we're at a medical college. And then explain, so we're doing the task now, explain the Krebs cycle in simple terms as if I am a medical student. So again, you're giving it more context. So it's going to be educational, it's going to be directed at medical students who have that higher level of knowledge but are still learning, right? So we're upgrading this, okay? So we've used probably 3 or 4 of these now. And then again, you can actually change this even further. So you are a tenured biomedical professor at a college of osteopathic medicine again. Explain the Krebs cycle as if I'm an experienced biomedical researcher and medical doctor. So we took this and we just changed the persona, okay? So I actually did this one just for time's sake, so I didn't have to produce it. So you see, explain the Krebs cycle like I'm a beginner, okay? And it's, the headings are pretty, stripped down. So starting material, it's trying to give an example of a delivery truck, all that, okay? And then if we go down to our second one, so now we want it to act like it's a biomedical professor and we're a medical student. So you can see it definitely changed the format, and it started using a lot more, higher level language, right? And concepts, okay? And then we go down to same thing, but I'm an experienced biomedical researcher. So right off the bat, you'll see its response. So given your background experience, I'll dive into the nuances of the Krebs cycle, okay? So you can see what it's talking about is much higher level, okay? So it's 3 very similar prompts. We're asking for the Krebs cycle, but just changing that persona, giving it a little bit different context, that type of stuff, completely change the output, right? So it's just very, very key to think about what type of information, what type of format, all that you want out of it, okay? One thing this is really good at is summarizing, okay? So this is the Krebs cycle. This is not all of it, part of it from Wikipedia. If we go back, whoops, that's the wrong one. So we could do real basics, say, please summarize the following information. Let's say format it a bulleted, actually, let's say format the key points in a bulleted list. Okay, and then we'll paste in all that information. So hit send, we'll scroll down, and there it goes, right? So it's taking all that information, ingesting it, and then hopefully putting in bulleted points that make sense, right? So ChatGPT is very good at summarizing really, really high level concepts. And if you want it at a really basic level, at a beginner level, it'll totally do that, right? Or it can just summarize meeting notes, all that kind of stuff. And let's go down. One thing I want to show too, I like to show this just in the variation of the different prompts and what it can actually do. So this is an entire paragraph that I took all the spaces out of, right? So if you've ever kind of, let's start the chat. If you've ever copied something over from maybe a PDF or something, and it somehow messes up the format, takes all the spaces out, or does something wonky, most of the time ChatGPT can actually fix that. So let's say, please insert spaces between the natural. Okay, so we'll paste in that text, and then you see it actually spits out the perfect paragraph, okay, with all the spaces in between. So like I said, that's just a unique use, probably not a constant use, but just to kind of get you to think about all the different ways that this can actually help you. This is like the ultimate assistant in that regard, right? So then of course we could go into data tables here. So I had one pre-made here again, just to hopefully show. So we can say, please generate an Excel table with the following column headers. So I have some random column headers, and then populate 10 rows of data, and add random numbers to the number column and last names and all that. So let's see. Oops. Oh, the Zoom controls are in my way here. Okay. So then you can see, since I did the format, right? I told it the task was to generate this, but the format is an Excel table. You could say spreadsheet, you could say all those types of things, right? So then it actually generated it here. So you could copy this, paste it in Excel. I mean, you could highlight it, that kind of stuff too. So, but again, it did it pretty well, right? Looks like there's good variation here. There's good variation on the numbers. Just very nice there. So there's a lot of different things. I mean, we could make an entire marketing campaign if we wanted to. So let's start a new one. So we can say, oh, that really got in my way there. I'm fighting the Zoom controls, I'm sorry. Let's see here. Okay, so that so I can actually see it better. Not letting me undock it either. Okay, so you're an expert social media marketing specialist. Okay, so we've given it that persona. Please outline a strong 30-day Instagram marketing campaign that a medical library affiliated with an osteopathic medical school can implement to highlight its anatomy resources. Okay, so we've given it the task, we've given it a context, all that good stuff. So including physical models, image databases, etc. Our target demographic is first and second year medical students. So let's just see what it spits out there. So just like that, we have a pretty good marketing campaign for a month, right? But one thing, again, this may not be perfect, so you may want to tweak it a little bit, add, subtract. But you can actually make this, you can go further with this, right? So we'll take day one. Okay, so this was great, but we'll say, please generate the content for this day. Okay. And then it'll actually write it for you. So you can have it start producing greater detail on the original outline, right? And I mean, we could keep going with this, haven't tweaked that. So I would probably take this and then, obviously form it to our library if I was going to use that. And generally, I don't think I've ever used a response 100%, right? You want to take it and form it. I love the brainstorming capabilities of GAI. So you can bounce ideas off of it. You can really, find gaps in what you're thinking, or if you just you cannot figure out how to finish an email, paste your email in there, ask it like, how can I finish this, or how can I add this part to it, that type of stuff, right? It's again, it's like the ultimate assistant for all of this. And I know we only have a couple minutes left. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of academic prompts, right? So developing a research question. I would say you can actually generate PubMed search strings. And I've been experimenting with this more and more. The problem is that it will make up mesh terms pretty consistently. I'm not really sure why, but it does make those up. But it's kind of a good base too, right? So it's good to generate your own, but then if you ask it to kind of look at it, maybe give it some ideas, it is fun how often it kind of comes up with one or two extra keywords that I wouldn't have thought about too. So developing research questions, again, brainstorming. One thing I will say, ask clarifying questions when you first start playing with this. So ask ChatGPT, how can I make my prompt better? Or, what questions do you want to ask me to actually suss out what I'm trying to get to? It'll understand that, and it'll actually ask clarifying questions just to make your prompt, make the response better. Because at the end of the day, all it's trying to do is give you that perfect response. All right. I know it's 10:30 now, so I'm going to jump back to this. So in the chat, we're going to put the link to the next Scholarly Snippet session, which is entitled Mastering Pico Search in Embase. And there should be a link to a survey, so please fill that out. Tell us how we did. If you have ideas for next, I want to do a follow-up session where I go a little bit further into actual prompting. I know I kind of ran out of time today, but I really wanted to give a base again on how this stuff works because I think it's important. And yeah, please contact me anytime at that email down there. I'm going to stop the recording here.